Hey everybody, this is a video testing out different build types to see which one is best, power, handling, or balance. And before I begin, the power builds I'm referring to throughout this video are not the ultra power builds that are usually rear wheel drive, require manual shifting, are very difficult to drive, and take a ton of practice to master. Those are really geared more towards the very most dedicated players. Rather, I'm talking about builds that simply contain more engine upgrades than stability and handling upgrades, and are geared more towards the less hardcore or just typical everyday driver, like an average dad. Okay, with that out of the way, let's begin. For the tests, I made several different builds focusing on what I believe are the primary parts for handling, tire compound, and weight reduction, and the primary parts for power, the engine itself and engine upgrades. And I'm only concerned about upgrades that cost a significant amount of PI points and impact all car classes. That's why something like anti-roll bars or front and rear aero may be on the build, but are not part of what's being singled out and tested. For each build, I applied my base tune, but did no fine tuning, in an effort to make everything outside of what is being tested as equal as possible. I ran 20 laps for each build and jotted down the best lap time. I used one car, the 2002 BMW M3 GTR, built as one class, an A800, and did all the testing on one track, the Horizon Mexico circuit. Taking all that into account, this is just one specific use case, and there are many more that could and really should be tested. Anyway, what I'm getting at is the result should be taken with a grain of salt. However, the learnings, at least to some degree of confidence, can, in general, be applied across the game. Build 1 will be a reflection of the way I prefer to upgrade, which is geared towards handling, and only for this build I'll go through the build process, and each succeeding build will just cover what was changed. First, if I don't mention a part, it means I left it stock. Okay, I converted to all-wheel drive, then tossed on the adjustable rear wing. I upgraded to the semi-slick tire compound, and used the widest rear tire width. I selected the widest front track width and the second to widest rear track width. The transmission is race 7 speed, and I'm using the race diff. I tossed on the race springs. Used both front and rear race anti-roll bars. Installed max weight reduction, which for this car is the only weight reduction. Upgraded the pistons a notch. And finally, tossed on some heavier rims to drop a PI point. Alright, the main focus here is using max weight reduction and the semi-slick tire. This qualifies as a predominantly handling build. After 20 laps, my best time was 1:06.659. For build 2, I swapped out the semi-slick tires with stock tires and kept max weight reduction. So in other words, I'm testing the importance of tire compound. And obviously, downgrading the tire compound freed up PI points, and I used those on engine upgrades. Upgrading the exhaust, upgrading the manifold, and upgrading the pistons another notch. This qualifies as a balanced build, a little bit of power from the engine upgrades and a little bit of handling by keeping max weight reduction. After 20 laps, my best time was 1:07.153. I was able to reach higher speeds on straights, but cornering was noticeably inferior, hence the half-second slower lap time. For build 3, I put the semi-slick tires back on, but this time I removed max weight reduction, opting for stock. The focus here is testing the importance of weight reduction, whereas build 2 was testing the importance of tire compound. And in relation to build 1, by removing the max weight reduction upgrade and going with stock, this also freed up some PI points, just not as many as build 2, since tire compounds are so costly. And I did the same thing, used those on engine upgrades, upgrading the manifold, upgrading the pistons another notch, and I was able to upgrade the flywheel a notch. Build 3, therefore, also qualifies as a balanced build, for the same reasons as build 2, just a little different makeup. After 20 laps, my best time was 1:06.971. About 0.2 of a second faster than build 2 due to the better tire compound, but still not as quick as build 1, about 0.3 of a second slower. The result of this test essentially shows that between tire compound and weight reduction, that tire compound is a better upgrade, as it should be though, since the PI cost is always more for tire compound upgrades. In addition, we can also conclude that both balanced builds, build 2 and build 3, were slightly inferior to build 1, the predominantly handling build. For build 4, I went for power. This build has stock tire compound and stock weight reduction. This freed up a large number of PI points, so much so that I was able to upgrade the engine itself, which was a huge power boost, and I upgraded the exhaust. After 30 laps, and it was 30, not 20, because for this big of a change it took several laps getting used to how it drove. But my best time on build 4 was 1:06.746. Not quite 1/10 of a second slower than build 1, the handling build, but nearly a quarter second faster than the best balance build. Now, I wanted to make sure I was using the best power build, so I did 2 other power-based builds, build 5 and build 6. For both builds, rather than using the upgraded engine, I put the stock engine back on. And for build 5, I used the PI points on aspiration, using the positive displacement supercharger and its upgrade found in the engine menu. And for build 6, instead of using aspiration, I used the PI points on other engine upgrades, upgrading the exhaust, upgrading the manifold, upgrading the intake, upgrading the valves, upgrading the pistons, and I was able to use lighter rims to add the final PI point. For build 5, my best time was 1:07.213, and for build 6, my best time was 1:06.938. Almost 3/10 of a second separate the 2 builds, but the fastest one, build 6, the one without aspiration, was still slower than build 4, which used the upgraded engine, by about 2/10 of a second, so upgrading the engine itself was the best power choice. So what does this all say? On the surface, it could be argued that handling builds are superior, albeit by a very slim margin, when compared to power builds, and balance builds are the weakest overall. And I do think that is a true statement for the game, outside of those uber power builds, which again, are the best if you take the time to master them. But it's worth mentioning that you can have too much handling, leaving you with an underpowered car. After playing the game enough, you'll eventually get a feel for how a car's in general drive, and you'll know, or at least suspect, when a car handles too well. So for those cars that naturally drive well to begin with, dump PI points into power instead. Also, some races simply favor power, races that have long stretches of mostly straight roads or gradual curves, where high speed can be maintained. Meaning a car that can corner like a mouse in a maze just isn't that important. One other thing I do want to mention, the 2 builds drive very differently. Handling builds are easier to drive, and power builds do take more skill. And one final point, since I'm talking about skill, at the end of the day, races are chaotic, and any benefit to a particular build is negated by other drivers crashing into you, or you crashing into them. So really, the best build is the one that allows you to take the most advantage of your current driving skill, since driving skill is far more important than any upgrade, or any tune setting, or any build style. Well, that does it, and thanks for your time. I do appreciate it, and I'll see you all later.